Hello everyone, I'm here to discuss the most important current affairs from UPSC perspective of today. All articles and editorials have been taken from The Hindu newspaper. So without a further ado, let's begin. Our first article for today says that the Supreme Court on Monday found it distressing that people are still being booked under the Section 66A of the IT Act. It is important to note that in a 2015 judgment, the Supreme Court had declared Section 66A of the IT Act as unconstitutional and violative of the freedom of speech guaranteed as a fundamental right under Article 19 of the Indian Constitution. The IT Act 2000 was amended in 2008 and Section 66A was introduced. Section 66A gave authorities the power to arrest anyone accused of posting content on social media that could be deemed offensive. In the economy section, the next article says that the RBI has announced to undertake the GSAP 2.0 or the Government Securities Acquisition Program 2.0 on 8th of July. So this is the second version of the GSAP. The first version was done in April 2021. Let us have a look at what government securities are. Government securities are basically debt instruments issued by the government to borrow money. The two categories of debt instruments, that is government securities, are treasury bills and dated securities. The T-bills or the treasury bills are short-term instruments which mature in 91 days, 182 days and 364 days. The dated instruments are the long-term instruments which mature from anywhere between 5 years to 40 years. The objective of GSAP by the RBI is to infuse more liquidity into the market. So the RBI has planned to purchase government securities from the market, which will result in more cash in the market or the economy, and this will result in interest and yield going down in the economy. As liquidity increases, the lending rates, that is the interest, come down and hence the borrowing activity increases. The RBI wants to reduce the interest rate in the economy as the union government is planning to borrow massively from the market because of a higher fiscal deficit. So note that fiscal deficit is the shortfall in income of the government compared to its expenses. So if the RBI will not pump money or cash in the economy by purchasing the government securities, then higher government borrowing may increase the interest rate in the economy, which will hurt both the government and the economic growth, and the recovery path will be quite difficult. So that is why RBI has planned for GSAP, that is purchasing of government securities. The next topic is an editorial which talks about the various theories of origin of the coronavirus and what needs to be done keeping in mind the science of the virus. So the article mentions that there are two theories or hypotheses in circulation regarding the coronavirus. The first theory suggests that the virus emerged from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, a leading coronavirus research center in which they were probably creating viruses stealthily in the labs. This hypothesis is fed by incidences such as reports missing from the website of Wuhan Institute, renumbering of virus originally discovered in a mine in 2012 that is the closest ancestor to the SARS-CoV-2, and the reports of researchers mysteriously falling ill at the Wuhan Institute in late 2019 only adds to the beliefs. The second hypothesis is that the virus emerged through a natural spillover event where a bat coronavirus jumped species and infected humans either directly or indirectly through intermediary animals that in turn passed it to the humans. So SARS started similarly in late 2002 from infected animals affecting humans in the market of Guangdong province in southern China. Also, the infections like HIV/AIDS, Ebola, MERS or the Nipah virus have all risen from spillover from animals to humans. So why is the world so worried about tracing the origin of the coronavirus? So if we want a better understanding of how and when people get infected in the first place, for both now and future outbreaks, experts say it's important to trace the virus back to its starting point. It is also about finding out in which species this virus is most likely to have emerged and in what circumstance it crossed over from animals to humans. This may help inform how we change our behavior towards certain animals, both wild and farmed. The article suggests that earliest samples from patients who were initially affected in Wuhan needs to be collected. The article also says that it is known that strain A and strain B emerged in Wuhan, so the people affected by them should be sampled. The samples from live animals sold in the market in the last 6 months of 2019 in the Wuhan markets should be obtained. The widespread sampling of animals in Chinese farms to search the ancestors of SARS-CoV-2 should be undertaken. Blood banks across China can test blood samples from 2019 to see whether they carried antibodies for SARS-CoV-2. But none of this could happen without the Chinese government's cooperation. The next editorial from The Hindu is about India-Africa relations in the agriculture sector and the rising Chinese influence in the African continent. The article mentions that China is among Africa's largest trading partners and also Africa's single biggest creditor. China is building government buildings, industrial parks, economic zones in Africa at attractively low cost. Labor-intensive manufacturing units of China are being relocated to Africa. Critical telecom infrastructures, venture capitalists from China investing in African firms are some other important Chinese activities in Africa. The agri-technological know-how to combat traditional challenges such as drones to control the armyworm infestation is also being imparted by China. China has set up agri-technological demonstration centers or ATDCs where Chinese agronomists work on developing new crop varieties and increasing crop yields. So the editorial mentions certain takeaways for India. The Chinese and African experts work at ATDCs in silos, that is, in isolation from each other due to their cultural and language barrier. There seems to be gaps in skills being transferred and the ground realities in Africa are quite different. There are underlying socio-cultural stresses related to the Mandarin-speaking managers and the presence of small-scale farmers in the local market. Currently, India and Africa have cooperation in the agri-sector with institutional and individual capacity building initiatives like India-Africa Institute of Agriculture, rural development in Malawi, soft loans, supply of machinery, Indian entrepreneurs in Africa, Indian farmers buying 6 lakh hectares of land for commercial farming in Africa, etc. So we have a varied and rich history of trade and other relations with the African continent. Recently, Kerala government also, to meet its cashew nuts requirements, has turned to Africa. Also, there was a proposal to create Africa Kolam Cashews, that is, a jointly owned brand by Kerala and Africa. Thus, state governments and the civil societies should also engage directly with Africa. India can counter Chinese money muscle by drawing up country-specific and localized curriculum, making demand-driven skill development and at the same time keeping their cultural ethos intact. The next article from the economy section says that the OPEC nations are unable to reach a consensus on increasing the oil production. So let us understand the topic in detail. In April 2020, that is last year, a 2-year agreement was signed by the OPEC members to reduce the production owing to the fall in demand due to the pandemic. In November 2020, however, the price began rising since the production remained low. Now, if the output is not increased, the prices will continue to be high. India and other countries are accusing the OPEC Plus nations of deliberately keeping the production low to keep the prices high. Also, it is important to note that India is counting on the OPEC Plus meet for a slash in global crude oil prices. So while we are here, let us look at these important points. Iraq is India's largest oil supplier and is a member of OPEC. USA is India's second largest supplier but is not a member of OPEC. Saudi Arabia is the third largest supplier to India. Let us read about what are OPEC countries and what is OPEC. So, Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries or OPEC refers to a group of 13 of the world's major oil exporting nations. OPEC was founded in 1960 to coordinate the petroleum policies of its members and to provide member states with technical and economic aid. Its founding members are Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. The headquarters of the organization are in Vienna, that is Austria. So apart from the founding members, these were the countries that joined the OPEC, but Ecuador, Qatar and Indonesia dropped at a later stage. It is notable that some of the world's largest oil producers like Russia, China and the United States are not a member of the OPEC, which leaves them free to pursue their own objectives. Let us also look at OPEC Plus. So the alliance of OPEC with the non-OPEC oil exporting nations forms the OPEC Plus. Countries like Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Brunei, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Mexico, Oman, Russia, South Sudan and Sudan are the part of OPEC Plus. Our last article of today is about the Delhi government's introduction of the adhesive labels on liquor to curb tax evasion, leakage in the supply chains and curb the sale of spurious or illicit liquor. So note that the excise duty was practically subsumed after the introduction of the GST on the 1st of July 2017, but it continues to be levied on alcohol and petroleum products. So that's all for today from my side. Do write in the comment section if you have any queries regarding a particular topic. Any appreciation or any criticisms are also welcome. Thank you so much. Have a great day.